Okay, we're ready to go. Okay, welcome everybody to Senate Transportation. So we'll just go ahead and get started here. I don't see any new testifiers here today, so let's go and get going with the roll call.
Senator Brennan.
Present.
Senator Furphy.
Here.
Senator Kolb.
Present.
Senator Pappas.
Here.
Chairman Boner.
Here. So the first Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 14, National Guard Professional Malpractice Liability. We have some members from the Wyoming National Guard. Gentlemen, welcome to Senate Transportation. Feel free to introduce yourself for the record and proceed with explanation of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Major General Greg Porter. I serve as the Adjutant General for the state of Wyoming. I've been serving in that position for the last 4 years, though I've been a Wyoming Guardsman for a little over 38 years now. Welcome to those of you that are new to the committee. Thank you very much. We've been doing better on our acronym discussion and talking in tongues, but if we say something that doesn't make sense at all or is not quite, please let us know. We'd be happy to back up and talk about it in English, if you will. Let me introduce you to Mr. Chris Smith, and I'll have him introduce himself on that one very quickly.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Chris Smith. I'm an attorney. I currently am the director of the Commander's Action Group for the Guard. And we've been working these bills during the interim.
Ready to go, sir?
Welcome, gentlemen. Yeah, please proceed with the, Senate File 14.
Sounds good, sir.
All right, Mr. Chairman. Senate File 14 is a relatively simple bill. It's 2 pages. It came out of an interim study. The Joint Transportation Committee adopted it as a committee bill. The purpose is to modify an existing piece of statute in 199402 addressing malpractice liability for professionals. What we recognized before the interim was the existing statute, which you can see down on page 1 on lines 13, 14. It previously, for the last 20 plus years, indemnified attorneys and doctors of medicine. So the problem was, as those of you who are here in the interim know, we have far more medical professionals and other professionals than just doctors of medicine and attorneys. So initially we were seeking to expand it to include all medical professionals. This committee during the interim said we should really make it broader, and anyone who has a license or credentials who is a part of the Guard and on guard duty would be indemnified. So when you look at the bill, it's 199402, as I mentioned. The change down beginning on line 14 on the first page and carrying on to the second page really indemnifies any member of the Wyoming National Guard who has practice of profession and meets the requirements of the National Guard for the practice of that profession. The idea being it would cover civil engineers, architects, doctors, physician assistants, attorneys, anybody that typically has some kind of credentials or licensing. This would only apply while they're on state active duty, on military duty. It's never been tested, this provision has never been tested that I'm aware of in our courts, but it's just good. It's good to clarify it, since we have far more than just attorneys and doctors of medicine in our ranks. I will say we have used this to attract professionals to us from out of state because they're not normally licensed in Wyoming. So we've used this provision at times to answer the questions about, yeah, I'll come to your Guard, but if I pull duty, am I going to get sued? And this is one of the provisions, besides sovereign immunity and some other legal concepts, that allows them to feel comfortable that while they're doing military duty in Wyoming, they're protected. That's the bill, Mr. Chairman, and I'll stand for the committee's questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Any questions, committee? Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Chairman Boner. What's the maximum liability that can be faced? Is it the same as for a medical doctor in the state of Wyoming?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, there is no maximum liability. There is no limitations. It only applies if they're in duty doing what their guard job is. So if We have had attorneys who fly airplanes, for example. It wouldn't cover them as an attorney while they're flying airplanes. But in terms of dollar limitations, I'm not aware of any.
Follow up. I'm well aware of have to be doing the duty that you're supposed to be doing. But there was with other types of incidences, and there was a difference between somebody doing, say, medical malpractice as the state covers it, and maybe you could help me out with that. Is this part of the rest of the pool for state liability coverage, or is this a separate account that covers this?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cole, this is nothing to do with risk management for the state employees. It would be, the scenario would be somebody would do something while on military duty, say a doctor, and they get sued in state court. This would bar that action. So there would be no file a claim and get paid something.
And that has not been tested yet?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cole, no, it hasn't in Wyoming, but similar provisions. This is a fairly common provision throughout the states trying to protect their National Guard members. Ours is very strong and clear. Some are a little more obscure, but I know it's been tested in some other states, and I'm not aware that any individual Guard member who was doing their duty and in the course of their duties that had any liability.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe, some information about how that's worked in other states would probably be beneficial for the committee. So, okay, committee, any further questions? Go ahead.
Just for the committee's benefit, the provision to change it from just medical and attorneys was one that I brought up in the interim because I, being an architect, I didn't have that, well, when I was in the military, I did not have that protection. And while it was not an issue with me, it is an issue with a lot of other folks. Especially if you do get called to state active duty and you're doing something on behalf of the state. Now, when I'm doing something in my practice, I pay for my own liability insurance, right? But, and so I do have an insurance company that will insure me for any of those errors and omissions. But if I'm going to do something for the state, I would expect the state to do the same thing that my company would do for me. So that's all we're doing here is we're asking these people to serve at certainly much less pay than they normally get, but still doing their professional, providing that professional expertise to the state. And so I think it's certainly fair that we extend it to all those professions, not just medical and the legal arena.
And so you had a laundry list of, I guess, examples of professions. And I got physicians, assistants, and engineers. What else would it be? I just didn't write it down too quick. I understand the architect one, but anything else? Right.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Within our ranks, we have physician assistants, doctors of osteopathy, DOs, nurse practitioners, civil engineers. We have an architect. I think those are the ones that I can think of off the top of my head. We do have we have an engineering company on the Army side. We have civil engineering on the air side. So we have a couple of different flavors of engineer. I don't know exactly what they are, but those are the ones that I am aware of off the top of my head.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful to know how you would actually use that, how many of your members would be affected by it in terms of when they go out and do the mission. So if there's they get called state duty and the civil engineering folks have to build a bridge, they would be covering that instance. That'd be an example.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, committee? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I just too want to point out that a doctor of medicine is different than a doctor of osteopath, and I assume you have some registered nurses too. Those are important to protect their licenses.
Yeah, it seems kind of arbitrary. We only have one. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Any further discussion? Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Chairman Boner. So if someone's doing something in the course of their duty, we had issues come up where there was a medical malpractice situation. They were doing it, they were abusing somebody while they were in their care. So let's just, a scenario where somebody's doing their duty, working for the Guard, but during the course of that duty, I'll just say it, there's a rape. Obviously it's not part of their duty, but doing their duty, does that shield them, or is there some sort of sideboards, a system that protects the person who had that happen to them? Wow. So basically they don't get out of jail card free. Obviously, first time I'm hearing this, so indulge me. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, this has no application in the criminal realm at all. It's purely about civil liability. So if they were in the course, if the alleged malpractice was in the course of their duties, then they would be covered from civil liability. But this has no application to actual criminal conduct. Clearly, they'd be outside the scope of their duties at that point, and they would be liable for whatever criminal activity they did.
Okay, thank you very much. Looks like, do we have any public comment here? Okay, Mr. Winnie, come on down. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. At the risk of sitting next to a lawyer, the wrinkle you're dealing with here is a difference between federal active duty and state active duty. And the federal realm, as long as they're within legitimate scope of their duties, which gets to Senator Kolb's question just a moment ago, there's sovereign immunity. And I've sort of seen a bit of that over the years in my time on active duty. They did have a case some 20 years ago where a Navy anesthesiologist doing an appropriate care thing so screwed up the anesthesiology that he was eventually held liable for it. But that's really off in the weeds, I guess you'd call it. The issue is scope of legitimate active duties, and in your case, what you're here is either, I guess, Title 32, where they're paid for by the feds, but they're technically on state duty, or purely state active duty, whether they're going to be covered. And as far as architects, Senator Pappas brought up the issue. You had a mud flow out there in Snake River Canyon, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and they may have had to use an architect or a civil engineer to get something back, because there's not a lot of ways around the state out there. So that issue of scope of active duty or scope of legitimate duties is the crux of it, tied to sovereign immunity. I look at this bill, I read the bill, talked it over with the colonel here, and it's like, this ought to be a no-brainer, yet still, there's times you need those pieces of paper. Subject to your questions, thank you.
Hey, thanks, sir. Any questions for Mr. Winnie? Hey, thanks. And I guess you could probably stay up there if you wanted to, but. Okay. Any comment online? Okay. Okay. Public comment is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure? Okay. Moved by Senator Furphy, seconded by Senator Pappas. Any discussion? Question being called. Let's go and do a roll call.
Senator Brennan? Aye. Senator Furphy?
Aye.
Senator Kolb?
Aye.
Senator Pappas?
Aye.
Chairman Boner?
Aye.
5 ayes.
All right, that one passes. Any volunteers to take this one on the floor?
I'll do it.
Okay, Senator Furphy, first on the gun. There you go. Next up, we have Senate File 15. Gentlemen, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate File 15, again, is a it modifies an existing statute concerning military leave for state employees. What's not shown in the bill as been a question is 1911-108A already grants this doesn't change that. What this bill is talking about is allowing after the 15 days of military. We'll get the technology working. In my experience, every state agency that we've dealt with an issue like this has never tried to fire somebody because they went longer than 15 days, abandoned their position. The problem we have is when we gain a new National Guard member, we always have to send them to some form of training. All military training, Army and Air, is longer than 15 days. So if they use their 15 days of mil leave, they technically could be fired because the statute doesn't allow them a leave of absence. So what this bill does, you'll see on page 2, line 1 and 2, it simply removes who has been employed for 1 year, basically allowing them to get a leave of absence immediately after being employed. So it really is that simple. I am unaware of anyone who's lost their job because of going on extended military orders. But again, it was raised to us. We looked at it and nobody could tell us why we had this 1 year prerequisite. So it became a committee bill to take it out. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for the committee's questions.
Any questions, committee? Senator Kolb.
Well, just for clarification, thank you, Mr. Senator, Chairman Boner. So no one has been known, it has never been a situation where someone was terminated from a job for going on guard duty when they didn't comply with the 1 year employment prior to going on duty.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, not that I'm aware of. I've only been in the Guard 20-something years, but.
In known history. So this is just basically a remnant of somebody's, good idea that should be in there. And there seems to, so the municipalities or whoever, when they hire a guard, somebody's in the National Guard, they well know that they're hiring somebody in the National Guard. And they do well know that, I'm assuming that they are going to be deployed. So when someone asks on the floor, how would this impact the municipalities if it's anything negative than currently policy? Your belief is that it's has not been an issue.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, it hasn't been an issue that I'm aware of. There is federal law that doesn't allow you to fire an employee because they go on military orders or because of their military status. What is nice about this provision is the federal law doesn't apply to every. There could be municipalities that are small enough to escape some of the federal restrictions. The other thing is my belief and my experience in talking with employers, including state agencies, hiring a Guard member is usually beneficial because they get lots of training. They get training in leadership, they get training in skills. This would apply not just to deployments, but also that training. So hiring a Guardsman certainly gives that state agency, municipality, somebody who has something more than just your average employee, in my opinion. I'm biased. So this just ensures, as you said, this remnant that nobody can really justify doesn't become something somebody tries to use against a Guardsman.
Any further discussion? Okay, thank you very much. Any public testimony? Mr. Winnie.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winning. this ought to cover reserves too, and I believe it does the way the language is. What's important to keep in mind is following the Vietnam era, and I hate to admit being a child of that era, but I am. The military restructured itself such that when those kind of things came up, reserves and guardsmen would be needed to be deployed. And in fact, Wyoming deployed a number of units during Afghanistan and Iraq. And so you've got that potential out there, and those guys were gone for like a year, 13 months, something like that. So that issue of the federal structure where they're going to need reserves and guardsmen if something like Afghanistan or 9/11 comes up, needs to be part of your thinking. And so this is a protection for any of those guys. Subject to your questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. Any questions? Thank you, sir. Anybody online? All right, public comment is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure? Okay, moved by Senator Pappas, seconded by Senator Kolb. Any discussion, committee? All right, question being called. Let's do a roll call.
Senator Brennan. Senator Furphy. Senator Kolb.
Aye.
Senator Pappas. Chairman Boner.
Aye.
5 ayes.
All right, who wants this one?
I'm running COW on Monday.
Oh, you are?
I am.
So, okay, very good.
I could do it, but yeah, you'd have to do a switcheroo.
Okay, our next bill is Senate File 53. 2 for 2, gentlemen, see what happens with this one. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate File 53 is a 4-page bill, which deals with medical insurance premiums. Again, it was a committee bill coming out of an interim topic. It really was born from, we looked at the interim at accessions and retention, the things that the state could do to help the National Guard with their accession and retention. This was one of the ideas to help with retention. What this addresses is when members of the Wyoming National Guard go on state active duty, they are gone from their civilian employment, whether that's with the state, the federal government, or a private employer. They have to maintain their medical insurance. That is a cost to them that is not reimbursed while they're on state active duty. What this bill does generally is provides an amount to reimburse them based on the number of days they pulled state active duty in an attempt to help them cover that cost of medical insurance for their private, for their family, for themselves, that otherwise is not compensated for. So as you can see from the bill, it essentially changes 19.9.403 by adding on page 2 at the top a new provision, subparagraph E, that allows, subject to appropriation, when a member is on state active duty, they may be reimbursed for medical insurance premiums paid. And down on page, on line 7 and 8, we limited it in the committee did during the interim. It's an amount not to exceed the daily premium cost of Federal TRICARE Reserve Select, which is the insurance that almost all Guard members can buy into, or its successor program, because there are times where they change the name, multiplied by the number of days of state active duty. So that's section 1. Section 2, down on line 13 on page 2, adds a 1/2 full-time equivalent position, state employee, to help run this program. One of the things that this committee and the legislature will see, we have several benefit programs that are going to require a state employee to operate, to run, to manage. So it was split in working with LSO and the interim committee. It was split among a couple of the different bills. So you get a half position here, you have a half position, I think it's with the House bill on an incentive for recruiting. We really want a body, a single position. Ultimately, if this body chooses to just add one position to one of the bills, that would probably be cleaner. But because we don't know what bills might move forward through both houses, we got a half and a half. So we have that issue. So that's section 2 on page 2 going on to page 3. And then on line 9 on page 3, there is an appropriation from the general fund of $55,000 to make this reimbursement for the period through June 30th of '24. I can provide to you, during COVID was a high mark of state active duty because we had numerous guardsmen throughout the state helping out in various medical facilities with the Department of Health doing COVID mapping. In fiscal year 18, for example, this bill would have resulted in $214.98 of cost because we had very few people on staff duty. In fiscal year 21, because we had a lot of people doing COVID support, it would have cost $44,000 and $44,221. So given what state emergencies occur within the state, that's kind of the range I can provide for you that this bill would have provided if it was in place at the time. The average per fiscal year from 18 to 22 was essentially $2,200. So we took the high point of $44,000, we took a low point of literally $15.19, and we took an average, and that's how we got to that appropriation amount in the bill on page 3. And then when you move on to page 4, it's just the effective date. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for the committee's questions.
So just so I understand that, you said the average was $2,200 per year?
Mr. Chairman, yes. If you look at 18 through 22, those fiscal years, the average was $2,218.74.
Okay, but and the appropriation is 55,000. That's significantly higher than even the 21.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and that was really based on the fact that the high during fiscal year 21 was 44,000.
Mhm.
The way the bill is written, the adjutant general can reimburse for less if the appropriation is not there, so you can cut it. Certainly, we talked in the interim a little bit about the amount of the appropriation. Whatever is attached to this bill, we will operate with, but that was our best guess for the biennium.
Okay, and that's, just to be clear, so I understand, that's in addition to the half a position, right? So,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
I mean, and so I think maybe, I'm just trying to anticipate going in front of appropriations, asking them for half an FTE at $48,000 a year for a program that might expend $2,000 on average.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and that's the difficulty here because we have a total of 3 bills that will add to our state section of the military department's burden to manage, in addition to the bill that was generously passed last year allowing childcare expenses to be reimbursed. That was last session. So that would create, if all pass, 4 programs that we need somebody to manage. So any one program probably doesn't justify it, but if you take them as a whole, we get there.
Fair enough, and with that previous program that's already been approved, did you get an additional personnel cost with that?
Mr. Chairman, no.
Okay.
It was just an it was actually, it was an allowance to use money out of the existing military trust fund. So it actually had no appropriation and no FTE attached to it.
Thank you. Any questions, Committee? Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Chairman Boner. Well, where do I begin? How many people is anticipated to be on this program? I guess I'm unclear about the cost per person. And I'm certainly unclear why I need a half full-time FTE to administer, I'm not sure how many people. I mean, I just can't believe that they'd be busy enough to justify, maybe a quarter FTE, I guess, but maybe it's very busy. Maybe there's a lot of people get hurt. I'm not sure. But it seems like a, I don't know, frankly, a desk with a name tag on it. And I don't know. This has to be justified, not, in the bigger way. So I look forward to, I guess, some of those things. That's my best stab at this. I'm just trying to understand, is it, how justified is this? Could you please explain? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, let me address a couple of things. For calendar year 22, the daily cost that would have been the maximum reimbursement for a member and their family is $7.66. For just the member, it's $1.50. We anticipate those are going to go up sometime in 23. I haven't seen the new numbers. So this is really cheap insurance, and we're only reimbursing for the really cheap rate. Obviously, full-time federal employees have to be part of Federal Employee Health Benefit, FEHB. That costs over $1,000 a month for a family. We're not doing that reimbursement. In terms of how many people this would apply to, this is the problem in a sense with this bill, in that it depends. Because like I mentioned, literally in fiscal year 19, we didn't have a lot of state emergencies. And we had one service member who spent 2 days on state active duty. So that cost was literally, he has a family, it would have been $15.30. Fast forward to fiscal year 21, and we had 60 service members on almost 3,000 days of state active duty, helping with COVID around the state, both helping the health department map and also hospital support, because they were so shorthanded during the pandemic. So obviously that's where you get the $44,000 number. So it is a wide range. It would only come into effect if the governor approves state active duty to put guardsmen on state active duty to address some kind of emergency within the state, which is the state component of our job. So and as I mentioned to the committee, in a vacuum, there could, that if we had a person or even a half-time person just doing this program, they probably would be sitting around a lot. But again, we're trying to address a lack of personnel to run whatever programs this body approves for the military department. You could strike the FTE from this bill, as long as you we would ask you to stick it on some other bill so that we got a body authorized.
Senator Pappas.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it would seem to me that, you can't really hire a person half-time normally. I don't know, maybe you could, maybe you couldn't. And I've seen it done in the past where we've written in the legislation that, if both bills pass, that only one FTE is. But if one bill passes, we're still going to hire one person, because you can't just hire half a person, I don't think. I don't know, maybe you can tell me different, but we're looking actually for this person to work not only on this program, but on the other program in the House bill, but also a program that you already have in place that you didn't get an FTE on. So, this person, I don't think will be sitting around because of this one program, because there's other two programs they got to manage as well. Am I correct?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, you are correct. I will tell you, I may have gotten a little cute when we were trying to try to mash all these programs together to get this done. If this were the only bill to pass, I think I would agree that halftime is probably too much for what we're seeing here. As you said, we were really trying to get after some of these other programs as well, particularly that are pushed. And when we were talking through that, that's what resulted in this half full-time position. The department would not be opposed if this body wanted to take that part of it out, because if this is the only bill that passes, even if we didn't get that FTE, I believe that the work this generated, we can figure that one out. It's going to be really needed though on the other side of the house. And like I said, maybe I got a little too cute trying to spread the risk across a couple of different bills instead. So if that helps.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, this bill, obviously, we're going to have to re-refer to appropriations anyhow. Perhaps we ought to ask appropriations to, in our budget bill, increase the authorization for 1 FTE in the budget bill and tie it to the passage of these bills. Maybe that would be the cleaner solution rather than them being in this bill. But we can go talk to appropriations, and if that's the case, we could take it out of, if they'll agree to put it in the budget bill, then maybe we just take it out of the other two bills and we just have one person that you're authorized for miscellaneous programs or whatever we call them.
Yeah, those are my thoughts exactly, Senator. So there's a way to, you do it in this bill, in the other House bill, or just do it through the budget. The appropriation, the additional FTE would be contingent upon passage of both bills. So Senator Furphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Help me understand this. An employee who's covered by health insurance by his employer, and often they'll split half and half. The employees has to pay half, the employer pays half. Well, let me tell you, those premiums are more in the range of $120 per month. And if I'm understanding this, we're reimbursing the employee by $7. That's hardly worth it. So if we're trying to retain people in the Guard, if we're going to propose a bill that helps them really stay in the Guard, I would say we've got to come up with more money than the $7 per month. So I'd appreciate your comments on that. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Furphy, thank you. You know, we'll take that back to the discussion we had during the interim. So we based this dollar amount on the TRICARE insurance that every Guard member is able to purchase. So if they elect not to do that because they want to buy better insurance or different insurance, or it's paid by their employer, that's certainly their call. We didn't think that reimbursing fully gave us, it was just too difficult for us to determine what the appropriation would be. Although I completely understand what you're saying there, sir, and agree with it. Just the discussion we had during the interim was everybody's able to get this TRICARE insurance. We have to be able to put some sort of pin on what the money would be. And that's what we came up with, since everybody's eligible to do that. You're right. And I concur with you that certainly other folks have more expensive insurance and can get that done. It's a little bit more difficult to figure out what the appropriation would be to do that, but not impossible, to get that done.
Any further questions, committee? Oh, yes, Mr. Smith.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. We're talking about a $7 daily cost. So if you were on stack duty for the entire month, it's $229. I just wanted to clarify that. So we put people on stay active duty for days and they get paid for each of those days. Second thing I wanted to mention that I think I failed to mention, when people go on stay active duty, they are technically state employees. They fall under workers' comp. We make them, as part of our internal policy, have insurance before we'll put them on state active duty. The problem is, as you are all probably very aware, workers' comp covers on-the-job injuries. If we deploy you to Saratoga to fight a flood and you come down with the flu or COVID and you go to the ER, it's not covered by workers' comp. That's why we make them have some form of insurance, which was part of the justification to have a reimbursement while they're on state active duty, because we make them have insurance to cover those things that are not covered by workers' comp. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And so you mentioned real quick, about $200 a month. What's the monthly pay for, say, a E3, brand new E3? You got a rough idea?
For just a single individual sold, it's about $76. I have for free insurance for a single individual. I have the family, my wife and I we pay $225, I believe, a month for that. And are you asking for an E3 salary?
Yeah, I just want to compare that $200 a month to what, say, one of your junior
Oh,
members
yeah.
might make. I mean, point is, I'm guessing it is kind of a big deal, but yeah, what would you say? Not to put you on the spot, but I mean.
Yes, sir. If you give me a second, I'll get on my phone and I'll Google it and find out what that is. So,
Okay, fair enough. But probably not much more than $1,000 if I had to guess, but I mean, it's,
Mr. Chairman, I would guess it's in the $1,700 range for, you add BAH and that sort of thing to it.
right, okay. All right, Senator Brennan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am wondering, this reimbursement, just to clarify, applies just to those who don't take the TRICARE insurance, or to everybody?
Mr.
Yeah, if you
Chairman?
can,
Oh, I'm sorry. Ma'am, yes, it's anybody, if they have Blue Cross and Blue Shield, they're only going to be reimbursed at the TRICARE rate. So it's for everybody that's got it, but they're only reimbursed at the TRICARE rate, if that makes sense.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I think I didn't make my question clear. So those Guard members that are on TRICARE, does this reimbursement apply to them, or no, because they're on the TRICARE?
Mr. Chairman, Madam Senator, yes, it does apply to them as well.
Okay.
Okay, any further, okay, Mr. Smith, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, you asked about an E3's pay. It generally ranges from $2,100 something per month to $2,400 per month,
Okay.
depending on years of service, and that's for the entire month.
Right, so could be about 10% of the, equivalent of 10% of a monthly salary if they're there the whole month. Okay.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
cool, thank you, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Bonner. Just a question, clarification. So if you go on deployment and you say we're working for a county, do you leave their employment and then become part of the Guard and you're totally disassociated with that employment? Particularly how it applies to like healthcare insurance. Can they carry it forward as they say if they want to keep the county plan, or how would that work? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, it typically, if it's less than a month, they will keep their insurance. Some members, if they're deploying for a longer period of time, will opt to get out of their employer's insurance, particularly if they're single. If they have a family, they almost never do that because you want to keep your doctors, you want to keep your current care. So they will continue to pay their civilian employer-based insurance really for the family. So, and that's for a deployment. So it really is an individual choice for deployments, because when they deploy the member, you have the ability to buy into different insurance. My experience has been with a lot of people, especially with children, they don't want to enter a new insurance program because it changes your doctors, changes your copays, changes your yearly deductible, and they don't want to mess with that. So they just maintain their private insurance.
As follow-up. So they get to keep the $7.66 windfall to cover their other insurance cost. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cole, it only would apply to state active duty. So if they deployed overseas, this bill would have no application. It's only when they're answering the call of the state to a state emergency to help their community in whatever it is, floods, fires, hail damage, all the stuff we've done in the past.
Okay, any further questions, committee? Okay, thank you. Go with public comment here. Mr. Winnie, welcome back.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. I really am not linked to these guys. Honest. As far as, Mr. Chairman, as far as Senator Papas's comments about administrative overhead, I'm not the right guy to talk to, but the concern is appropriate. I've done my share of budgets in another life. But as far as Senator Furphy's comments and the other things, I have a son and a daughter-in-law that are both Guard members, and healthcare costs and these kind of things make a difference to them. I don't know if they would be covered specifically by any of this, but healthcare comes up in conversations around the table with them with some regularity. So for the member side of it, state active duty, separate from the federal funded active duty, makes a big difference, and I support the bill. Subject to your questions, thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Winnie? Thank you, sir. Any comments online? Okay, public comment is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Senator Pappas, second by Senator Brennan. Any discussion, committee? Senator Kolb.
Just a clarification on the FTE position and how it would work with appropriations.
All right, so we can get the bill re-referred to appropriations, and they have the ability to amend the bill solely dealing with the provisions that focus on appropriations. So that what I would suggest is that we could just let them amend it, because there's a couple different ways that we would be depending upon their expertise to. I think the bill does need work in that regard. We have at least two options we can present. So yeah, it's something I'd defer to appropriations expertise. I think we got the same idea, just a matter of how you execute it. Senator Pappas.
Yes, and I think we ought to, one of us, and I'd be glad to do it, depending on when they meet and if I'm not in committee, just explain to them, go and explain exactly what we've heard about the one FTE that's going to be covering multiple programs. They need to understand that, or it won't make any sense to them if we go to, all they get is just the bill.
Yep, and so whoever the floor manager is, I'll be there for responsibility to see it all the way through, including the appropriations process. So, all right, any further discussion? Okay, let's go ahead and vote on the bill.
Senator Brennan. Aye. Senator Furphy.
Aye.
Senator Kolb.
Aye.
Senator Pappas. Chairman Boner. Aye. 5 ayes.
Okay, Senator Pappas, you volunteered and appreciate that. So we'll get that re-referred and we'll be talking to the Appropriations Committee. Very good. Okay, anything else for the good of the order? All right, we are adjourned.